My name's Howard Redwood. I'm head of road safety for the DIA. I worked for the DIA from 2009 to 2014. I left and I've been re-invited back again to help now for the foreseeable future as head of road safety again. And with me today, I have Mark Yaffe. So, Mark, if you
Yeah,
can introduce yourself.
yeah. I work with the DIA as the chief motorcycle driving examiner for the Diamond Advanced Motorcyclists. I'm very active within motorcycle rider training. I sit on a number of Department of Transport and DVSA subcommittees to talk about rider training going forward. I'm fundamentally, I do a lot of post-test training. I'm an examiner for the Institute of Advanced Motorists for ROSPA. I'm also a national observer assessor for the IAM, so I assess national observers at levels. I also run the largest motorcycle training school in the country, so I'm very, very much involved in rider training from right the way from CBT level right the way up to advanced and national observer levels within the IAM. So that's a little bit about me.
Good. Thank you for that. That's very, very comprehensive, and that's given everyone a good taste of who they've got that they're listening to. We always find it better for them to look at the screens rather than look at us because we might scare them. So, a situation where we'll ask Tom to move the slides on. So, what we're covering here today will be how the lockdown has affected the two areas of training, how recovery has taken place, how healthy is the driver and rider training industry now, and looking to the future. So again, I'd ask you to put your questions in the question box, everyone, please. And if you have any chats and you want to chat amongst each other, then you can sometimes get CPD out of that. So if you could move on, please, Tom. The next slide we've got is talking about what on earth happened in the lockdown. Really, it's and did we see this coming? What's your view on it, Mark? What's really happened with the rider training industry?
So obviously the lockdown obviously took everybody a little bit by surprise. I don't think any of us could have seen it coming unless we'd had the actual medical knowledge that was being shouted out. But as far as rider training is concerned, we haven't really stopped throughout the lockdown. Because we have from relatively early days of lockdown, we maybe shut down for a week or so while we gathered our thoughts, I guess, and started to come to terms with the new norm. But then we were allowed to continue training key workers on 125 motorbikes for CBTs. As long as we put in social distancing measures and we were able to do that. So I don't think we were as affected as the car driving, the driver training industry, because social distancing on motorcycles is extremely easy to do. For a start, we don't sit in the same vehicle. When we're training people in rider training, we have the student on one bike and we're on another bike. Now, by its very nature, that means we're at least 2 meters apart because of the fact that we're on separate vehicles. The weather has helped us over the lockdown as well, because with good weather, that has meant that we've been able to conduct our classroom sessions outdoors as well. And we've been effectively able to certainly do key workers all the time we weren't doing full license training. So I wouldn't say that we weren't badly affected. We were, of course, but we probably weren't as badly affected as driver trainers.
Were you in a situation though where you were told that? I mean, I was feeling the calls coming through from some of the smaller organisations that were concerned as to whether they were still allowed to do a 2 or 3-to-1 on CBT, or were you told by the DVSA that you can only do a 1-to-1 session?
So the DVSA didn't give us any specific guidance.
Right. Okay.
What they did do is they told us what they would be doing with key worker tests, and that was
Right.
1-to-1.
Hmm.
Now, that's obviously a very good way of doing it, and a lot of rider trainers did exactly that. They just did one-to-one with key workers. Not only key workers, but we had to have people that were proved to be key workers. It's not too bad, but only on CBTs. But as we've seen, especially with the major conurbations where there's a lot of public transport, London especially, public transport dropped off all over the country to almost zero, and the number of people wanting to get onto motorbikes to avoid public transport has significantly risen as well.
Yeah, and I think really that's helped us, to be sure, because we've got the
Mm,
winter coming on, and the people who are quite inexperienced on the bikes will be doing sort of baptism of fire, riding around in the winter. And
mm,
I think that's what's going to help feed our industry is when they would like to come off the bikes and get in the car,
get in the cars, yeah.
but we get them with a little bit of road sense. All right, they might be on the wrong size vehicle for us and trying to get through gaps that aren't there when we put them in
Mm.
the car. But as far as we're concerned, they have got some knowledge of more judgment and
And
acceleration
and
sense.
and and there's a lot of evidence to show as well, Howard, that motorcycle riders and bike riders make safer car drivers as well.
Oh, they
There's
do. The observation's
a
far
lot of
better.
lot of evidence to
Yeah,
say that helps totally. Just noticed a question on there for Rob about he's amazed at the time it takes to sanitize a car. I don't know about the car, but with bikes, of course, it's much easier because we typically do day lessons. We don't do hour or 2 hour lessons. As far as rider training is concerned and sanitizing the bikes, it's a lot easier. We only have to sanitize them once a day because that student will be on that bike all day long. Whereas, from the rider training point, the driver training point of view, you've got people in and out of cars, hourly or 2 hourly, and I can understand Rob's concern there that it does take extra time to sanitize the car, but and that is of course why the DVSA have reduced the number of tests available at the moment. So it gives you the opportunity of doing that, or the examiners doing that as well when they take people to test now.
yeah. We've also got the problem as well. Although you're talking about doing sanitizing between lessons and also between demonstration drives, but we've also got ideally the industry should be looking at doing a deep clean in the car every week as well to keep the standards back up again to start the week, so that
Mm,
all you're doing is basically trying to keep the sanitary level of the vehicle as high as possible throughout the week, and then deep clean it again the following week.
mm,
And we've got to use something like bleach-free disinfectant to do it with, as long as it doesn't do damage to your surfaces on the vehicle. But we have to do ideally wipe down everything, and that means taking everything out of the glove box, taking everything out the door pockets, and wiping all that down too. When the students come into the vehicle, you haven't got the problem of them dropping keys down on dashboards or mobile phones on dashboards. What they bring, they've got to carry on a bike. Whereas
mm,
we've got the contacts there as well, which you have to consider too. So
mm.
there's I mean you've got your day easier on one part of the day in terms of saying you haven't got to keep stopping to clean things. You may have to wipe down the tank and the key after doing fueling up and that sort of thing with gloves and that sort of thing, but that's probably the only extra cleaning you've got to do until you finish the day's work. But what happens with the protective equipment that you actually lend out, or have you stopped doing that now and they can bring their own?
So we actively encourage them to bring their own.
Yeah,
We have got some special offers from various equipment suppliers through the dealers where they can buy a starter kit at a decent price
yeah.
to help with that. But if they do use our equipment, we have to sanitize it at the end of the day, and we rotate that. We leave that kit in a quarantine area for 48 hours
Mm.
before it's reused. Um, Anybody using our gloves has to wear plastic surgical gloves underneath it,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
in these temperatures is very sweaty. But hey ho,
Mm.
that's a part of it. So yeah, we do have a sanitizing program to go through. However, there is a lot of people bringing their own kit as well.
Well, they
Radio,
need it anyway, don't they, to be
yeah,
honest?
They need it absolutely
Yeah,
to
yeah.
when they buy the bike. So the fact that we've got some national deals going with some of the equipment suppliers to provide that at a relatively cheap price is really quite good. We do get a lot of people bringing their own kit as well.
Hmm.
But if we do have their own kit, if we do have kit that we need to use for people, then we will sanitize them and sort that out.
Hmm.
Um, it's exactly right.
Okay.
So yeah, especially with things like earphones as well, headphones, because we communicate via radio between the instructor and the student. We insist they bring their own earphones with them, so that we don't have to sanitize earphones either. Um, and if you take somebody to test, the DVSA will expect you to have your own earphones. Otherwise, they have to throw the earphone away afterwards, which gets very expensive.
They're not allowed. Your candidates aren't allowed to have mic. Are they allowed to have microphones, or is it just
Yeah,
not ongoing
absolutely.
practice? They
And
can.
yeah, and to be honest, if we have, because the more modern way of rider training with radios is using Bluetooth devices,
Mm, yeah,
which are bi-directional.
yeah, yeah,
They're fully duplexed devices, and to be honest, it's actually a much better way of training, because the candidates can ask questions real time,
yeah,
rather than you having to stop and talk to them if it's only omnidirectional. So the
yeah,
reality is there's been a major change in the way that we do training, because providing their own earphones leaves their microphone open all the time, and you can have that two-way conversation,
yeah,
which is in my opinion the way forward for rider training with radios, rather than the old PMR
yeah,
one-way radios.
yeah.
The new Bluetooth kit where you've got two-way works really well.
Yeah, I used to find when I was doing bike training that when I was doing the CBT, that if ever I pulled them over, because obviously they couldn't talk to me in those days, I'm going back
Mm,
to 2005, 2006, they couldn't talk to me. I had a lot of times when I was doing it, I got them off the bike and they say, "What have I done wrong?" And that was the
mm,
first thing they thought. You pulled them over
mm,
because they'd done something wrong. It wasn't. It's because you had to talk to them at some time or other, because they could only retain so much information. But
mm,
now you've got the Bluetooth, you
mm.
can keep feeding them all the time. It's
Absolutely,
what we
and
can do in the car as well. You see, we can feed all the time as well.
that's right, and it makes it a lot better, having that two-way conversation rather than the one-way conversation.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. Okay. Tom, if you go on to the next slide, please. We're going to talk about COVID and the effects on the business, if you would. So, bike sales, we mentioned very briefly before we actually started. So, one or two of the people that have joined us didn't hear that conversation of bike sales going up through the roof. I believe it's on the smaller bikes that's gone up most, and the bigger bikes, they've remained quite static, haven't they?
So the small bikes absolutely gone through the roof. You're totally right. We've seen a 43% increase in people wanting to do CBTs, and in fact now to get a CBT, the waiting lists have increased vastly. We're now talking middle of September before you can get on to CBTs,
Right.
and there's another reason for that as well, because we're trying to. Um, because we're trying to increase the amount of social distance between them, we've had to reduce the class sizes.
Yeah.
So we've got an impact of reduced class sizes for CBTs, because we are, by law, we're able to train 4 to 1.
Hmm.
4 to 1 isn't particularly good.
No.
3 to 1 is a much better relationship. But so, for example, if we were to have um, let's say 9 people on a course.
Yeah.
Pre-COVID, we would do 9 people all starting at 8 o'clock
Yeah.
with 3 instructors.
Hmm.
That enabled you then to decide where there were some strugglers. If there were some strugglers, you could peel them off to one side,
Yeah.
and one instructor could concentrate on 2 or 3 strugglers,
Mm.
while the other two instructors continue with the others that aren't struggling, and that really does make for very efficient training. But because we're now splitting the courses and we're having a maximum of 2 or 3 at a time, we've got an 8 o'clock, a 10 o'clock, a 1 o'clock session. So we're doing the same number every day, but split up into separate sessions. That then doesn't allow the opportunity, if you've got a struggler, to peel him off onto a separate
Mm.
thing.
Mm. Okay.
Um,
The thing about the bike sales is that that tells the ADIs that I mean, let's just ask you one more question about bike sales. The CBTs, are these all youngsters trying to be mobile,
no,
or some of them mature
no.
drivers?
I would suggest the average age at the moment is about 30, 32,
Right. Okay.
something
All
like
right.
that. So not necessarily. The majority of those are people that are simply wanting to avoid getting onto public transport.
Yeah, and
Um,
also it's because they're cheaper to run as well, so they're not running the good car, and they might be able to get rid of the car if they're single.
And yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Another very similar story we hear is a husband and wife with 2 kids.
Yeah.
Husband takes the family car to work. The wife has the Metro, or
Mm.
the little Fiesta, to do
Mm.
the shopping and do the school runs. They're tending to get rid of the second car.
Yeah.
Husband goes to commute by bike, and so yes, they're saving money on a car. And again, when things start to get tight financially, unfortunately for the driver training industry, we see people moving on to the the riding
Yes.
industry,
Yeah.
as cars become a little bit more of
Yeah.
a luxury. Um, if money is tight, whereas bikes are so cheap to run, 150 miles to the gallon
Yeah.
on a 125 bike, and with all the new electric stuff coming on board as well,
Yeah.
it's very, very economical to do. So yeah, it is a bit of a boom time for bikes and the rider
Yeah,
training industry.
this means then really that the ADIs that are listening to this is now food for thought about how you actually deliver your all of your information and context and understanding to your students on observations, because a bike's one third the width of a car. So they are
Mm,
hard to see in the mirrors because we've got the blind spot, we've got the pillars, everything else. So it makes you guys vulnerable, but it makes you even more vulnerable if the ones that we train aren't trained properly to look for you. And
yeah,
once I became a motorcycle instructor, when I was training the OSM puzzle, the observation,
yeah,
signal maneuver, position, speed, look routine, whenever I had somebody in the car who was a motorcyclist, they never ever forgot the blind spot checks before moving off, and they very, very, very often put a blind spot check in when they were waiting to turn right to approach a T junction on the right. So they're waiting for the oncoming traffic. There'll be a blind spot check as well before they actually turn the wheel to turn into the junction. And there was that extra level of observation I used to get from them. And I think we've now got to start as ADIs upping up the observation that's required by ones who we get who have got very little road sense. They're being paid for by mum and dad to get their training. They've got to get it done before they go to university, so they're trying to cram it. And I think sometimes the ADIs pander too much to the fact that the kids want to get it done because it's got to be done now society. They're frightened of missing out, and
yeah.
and I think we've got to change our training techniques a bit more now. Now your bike sales have gone up and the protective equipment's got a little bit cheaper. It makes it a much, much better viable option for people to get off public transport and get their freedom. And I think we've got to start thinking about how we are going to be doing our initial lessons of not just controls, but also about the observations and all the sight lines. And it's not just mirror signal maneuver, it's additional observations required as well.
Absolutely. We ran a trial with Transport for London about 4 5 years ago, maybe, yeah, about 5 years ago. And what we did was we took 300 new car learners,
Hmm.
split them down the middle. 150 became the control group, and the
Hmm.
other 150 came along to us to do CBT training. And then Transport for London monitored those two groups over the next 2 or 3 years, and it showed that the ones that had bike training actually had less accidents
Mm,
and were better drivers than the ones that
mm.
didn't have it. So it is very much it is very much a known fact that you get better car drivers out of bike riders,
Yeah,
which can only be a good thing. And if we can encourage more 16, 17-year-olds to get on bikes, to start with, then it makes your job as driver trainers easier because they've already got the road sense,
that's right. Yeah,
and they're already there. So we're halfway towards getting a better driver. And I'll tell you what would be good, and this has just come off the top of my head. It would be good to see if we could get some form of DIA survey to find out the number of lessons it takes for a new driver to get to test standard on
Mhm,
average.
mhm.
A, if they're a biker first, or B, if they're a non-biker. And I wonder if there's a significant difference in time. I don't know if that's anything that anybody has ever
Well, from my
thought
18 years
about.
experience as an ADI, I can tell you that the people I've had on a bike beforehand, especially if I'd done the training on the CBT beforehand anyway, because I was
Mm.
in the car as well, they were getting through in significantly less lessons than they would do if they were completely green to coming into a car.
So maybe there's a way that the driver and rider training industry can work together instead of taking. And this is really just blue sky thinking and just,
Yeah, yeah,
me voicing an opinion. It might be beneficial for rider trainers and driver trainers to team up and then get, maybe instead of them doing, I don't know, 40 lessons, they do a CBT day, and then they can probably get through in 30 lessons or something.
yeah.
I don't know. It
Um,
would be a thought process. Obviously, there's commercial aspects to think about for that, but yeah, at the end of the day, if we're trying to produce a better quality of driver, and increase the first time pass rates, maybe that might be something, that we can do. And yeah, thank you, Parham. Yeah, he's just come up with, yes, he agrees in I think what we've just said. It might be,
yeah.
something, and it might be something that we can think about later on in terms of seeing if we can get some stats, and maybe pushing people down bike training first to make them better car drivers.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, it's going to free up space on the road with the bikes being on the road, providing everyone can learn to share the road space. And the biggest problem we've got, and I mentioned this last week in last week's webinar on fleet, is the highway code has one fundamental flaw. It's written as a book of blame. It does not. It's not written to share road space. And the
Mm,
problem we've also got is the driving essential skills that's supposed to help explain the highway code is written for the national reading age of 11 to 12 years old.
mm,
So therefore, people switch off. The
mm,
intelligent people to switch off, they won't read it anyway. And that's the problem we've got. So I think we have to think of, with bikes and cars and with vans, actually extended to vans, that we've got to start thinking outside the box and get more practicality into the training rather than relying on a theory test. It's when people do the theory test, I feel that they tend to closet and think, right, theory test pass, tick the box, practical test pass, tick the box. I've now got my license. I can forget all about that now and learn to and drive how I want to drive. And
mm.
so we've got to change a lot of behaviours here as well. And I
Yeah,
think we've got to do it as joined up thinking with the LCV sector, the category B sector in LCV, and also on the category A sector on the bikes. I think it ought to be joined up more. It really ought to be.
yeah, no, absolutely. And the issue has always been, is been one about, how do we make this happen? We all know in road safety, and a lot of people will agree that this is the right thing and the right way to do it. But
Mm,
it's how we go about doing it, whether we can
yeah.
just do it internally, or whether it's something that requires legislation to be able to do.
I think we need big training areas for it, to be honest with you. If training areas could be put aside for it, where the three could integrate, that's what is required. And they started to try and do that in Northern Ireland, out by I think it was Cookstown. There was an area of land that was designated near by Belfast as an area of land that some of the ADIs there had a local association, and three of them were motorcycle trainers in Northern Ireland, and they managed to persuade the local authority out there, because they didn't all come under Belfast, they came under other local authorities as well, to persuade them to designate this land for driver training. And everything was going swimmingly forward to get it all done. The planning permission was done. They had a quantity surveyor out there to start ordering all the tarmac and building the hills and everything else. And then the government changed.
Hmm.
And as soon as the government changed, it wasn't a good idea anymore. We can't afford to do that. We can't afford to do this. So the problem we've got is keeping things, once they start, keeping them going through any government that we've got, but they don't just scrap it and say that's no good because it won't get us any votes. It's that sort of thing we've got to be careful of. We've got to try and get around that.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's a big problem.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. It's a vote winner, isn't it, or a non-vote
Yeah,
winner, I should say. But
yeah, yeah.
it needs somebody to be able to change it. Yeah, I agree with you in terms of the space, and the only issue you've got to think about is the the space for it in some of the more populated areas. There just isn't the space. There was one in East London somewhere that was called Cardrome, which
That's it.
was
It's
a
over by
massive area.
Harold Wood. It's near
That's
Harold Wood by Dagenham. Yeah,
That's it.
yeah,
But
yeah.
that's now being knocked down for
Oh, is
houses.
that really?
So yeah, unfortunately,
Mm,
areas like that, although they do exist, some places in the country,
mm, mm,
there is the pressure on housing and
yeah.
building, and I don't suppose the government's announcement in the last few days is going to help in terms of planning permission
No,
to
no,
get
that's
large
right.
swathes of areas for it.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's a really good idea going forward, but
yeah.
I think
Okay.
perhaps it won't happen. But what we can do, of course, is we can work with ADIs and driver and rider trainers to try and make sure that we can get people. Here you are at 17. Have you considered riding a motorbike? Um,
Mm.
and that will cut down the number of lessons and or increase your chances of a first time pass. Because
Do you have, sorry, did you have any AGIs working for you in areas that you're aware of that actually cross over between bikes and cars?
no,
Would
we don't.
you do you not consider working with organisations around the country and linking up with ADIs and say, right, we've trained this guy on the cars. We can recommend certain people for you to go train with an ADI, and the ADI does the same thing for you.
Yeah,
Have you considered
we've got
that?
a couple of local things. You build relationships up at test centres, don't you? Or we did
Oh, that's
before.
right. Yeah,
We did before we could, but before we weren't able to sit in test
yeah,
centres.
yeah,
But there are those small local relationships going on. Yes, of course there are, and
yeah.
lots across the country. However, maybe I'm thinking a little bit more formal than that,
Mm, hmm.
to see whether or not we can make slightly more formal uh,
Mm,
arrangements between driver and rider trainers. Obviously, the one thing we need to think about there is GDPR and make sure that we can share data
hmm,
between people as well.
hmm, hmm,
Um, but if we had a more formal, more rigid type approach,
hmm.
where ADIs work with rider trainers,
Yeah.
or even ADIs becoming rider trainers.
Well, we're going to talk about that at the end, Mark. I'm going to
Yeah,
answer that question
absolutely.
at the end. It's not going to
And
do about that. Okay.
and maybe that will help, because it certainly does. I mean, what do you know what the current first time pass rate is for cars nationally?
Yeah, I believe it's quite low. It's down to about 48 to 50%.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
maybe we can improve that. Motorcycle training typically sits at around about 81, 82% first time pass
yeah,
at mod 1 and 2.
yeah.
So there does appear to be
Big
a
disparity there, isn't there?
bit of a disparity,
Yeah.
and that might of course be because motorcyclists also have car licenses,
Hmm.
so they've been through the process before, or
Mm.
the average age is slightly higher because it's 24 for direct access into the big bikes, so therefore you are you're not dealing with sort of 17, 18, 19-year-olds as you are with ADI
Yeah, I don't think the
cars.
banks are so time pressured because the youngsters have always got somewhere else to be, like university, or they've got to get their job, or their mum and dad aren't prepared to pick them up late from work from the fish shop that they work at or anything else. It's that sort of thing. There's always some other reason why they want to do it. It's not just to be in with the mates. It's mum and dad don't want to be the taxi driver, so some of the kids are put into a car, and some of them don't actually want to do it. Mum and dad are
Mm,
forced them to do it. Whereas I tend to find on the motorbikes, it is vocational, and someone gets on that bike because they want to be on that bike, and it's a different mindset.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're totally right on that.
Yeah,
Totally
yeah,
right on that. But yeah,
yeah,
it would be good, if and it's certainly something to take away from today, to go away and start to think about, a more formal tie-up between driver and rider trainers.
yeah. And even crossover with the actual training processes, to be honest, because I mean, there's some things that you do about safety equipment on as one of the modules for CBT.
Hmm.
I believe, do you not? Yeah. I mean, there's no reason why we can't think about you. You do a safety module of what the guys have got to wear. We
Yeah,
ought to do a safety module about how do you store things in the car properly so it doesn't do laps around the car when you brake hard. I mean,
yeah,
the amount of
absolutely.
times you see people who've got dogs on the back seat, or they've got a box of tissues on the back parcel
Mm,
shelf. You
mm.
only want a hard brake, and that hits them on the back of the head, and it's going to damn well kill them.
Yeah,
So
no,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, you've got an aspect. Perhaps we could look at the modules that there are in motorcycle training and CBT, especially because that's the Janet and John side of getting on a bike, basically, without being rude. But it's the basic way of getting them started. Well, we're the same thing in the early stages of doing training. There's things that we could do before they get in the car a bit more, which you do, where you could tie up things like what are we going to what sort of protection are we going to have to do? What care have we got to take getting off a bike? What care have you got to take getting out of a car and getting in a car? Where are you going to park your bike? Are you going to park at right angles to the curb or parallel with the curb? And what are you going to do with the car? Where can you park? Where can't you park? Those things could tie up together. And I think there's certain things on where kids are sort of 16, 17, like you're saying, who are taking a theory test for cars. I don't see why they couldn't put some moped and motorcycle questions in the car theory test, because some of these kids will be going into those things later on, or
Mm,
vice versa, why they can't put a few ones for cars in the bike theory test.
mm,
Because the thing is that the CBT doesn't have a highway code test as a module, does it?
no, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, there's a new program just being launched by the DVSA called Ride Free.
Yes, right, yeah.
And Ride Free is designed to, it's like a mini theory test before they come along and do their CBT. So it gives you
Right.
a lot of the information as well. But like everything, it's only voluntary, and so we can
Yeah.
only recommend people do that.
Hmm.
But yes, it's definitely something that that we tend to spend more time on,
Hmm.
and rightly so, because at the end of the day, we do have some protection issues in terms of we are more vulnerable on bikes,
Mm.
and so I guess some of that stuff is a lot more relevant. But yeah, you're right about storing stuff in cars and stuff,
Mm.
or
Yeah,
rattles
yeah,
around on the back seat, etc.
yeah.
Yeah, it's not particularly good. So
Okay.
yeah, good.
Tom, can you move us on, please? So the next thing we're talking about, how do you prepare for the next pandemic? And I don't want to be a put a kibosh on things, but the government are actually saying that they are really fearing the winter, and that COVID is not going away as quickly as they want it to. And we've now got a problem. I believe in Aberdeen has now got a problem where they've got to start considering doing a lockdown up there. So in terms of the winter coming on, and people, the country starting to withdraw if we get more local bursts, etc. Is there anything that you think in terms of bike training or bike testing perspectives that should be discussed now with the DVSA? Because these conversations, we've got to have a conversation with the DVSA as an industry and say, what the bloody hell went wrong and what's still going wrong now in terms of testing? What do you think is something we could take to the table?
So as far as what went wrong, from the discussions that we've been having as a focus group throughout the lockdown is that the DVSA have never ever turned off the booking system in the time that it's been running, and that is quite a very number of years. They've never suddenly stopped everything, and I think this has caused the issues, especially for vocational trainers, where we can buy tests ahead of time. We normally you buy tests ahead of time, 10 weeks ahead of time, and this is just for motorcycles, LGV, and PCV, and I think trailer testing as well.
Yes, B plus C. That's right. Yeah.
So the online booking system enables us to book tests ahead of time. It's also available for car tests as well, but I don't think very many ADIs use it. It's never been stopped before, so when they had to suddenly stop it on a national basis, that caused a massive amount of work in the background. I think there was something like 240,000 tests had to be cancelled and reallocated, and I think that's caused the biggest problem. I would hope that going forwards, we're not going to have another national shutdown. I think that we might get local shutdowns, which the DVSA, I believe, will be better equipped to deal with, where they're only having to concentrate on maybe Aberdeen, for example, or Leicester, or wherever it is. I think if it comes to another national shutdown, I don't think that they will be as bad as this time, because this caught them unawares, but I still don't think it's going to be pretty.
No, I don't think it will either. We've got a lot of, I mean, will you find this time around, if it happens again, that some of the smaller motorcycle outlets and trainers will probably close? Because I know one in Wales did. I spoke to the lady who owned it and said that we just cannot go on anymore. We've got to stop. But we've also had, I think we've lost, through this pandemic, we've lost about 800 ADIs off the register.
Yeah, I think it's going to happen. I think certainly the smaller schools might not survive the winter. Motorcycling is relatively seasonal. Motorcycle training is relatively seasonally based. A lot of the schools rely on the summer to build up the coffers to allow them to get through the winter. The lack of testing and the availability of testing is going to put a massive amount of pressure on the finances of some smaller schools. If you've got some substance behind you, then you should be able to get through that okay. But it is going to affect rider trainers in the winter. Maybe not so much at the moment, because they're concentrating a lot on CBTs. Theory tests is another problem, of course, because it's September, October, even into November before you can get theory tests. And unlike driver training, where you typically spread out your courses over 2-3 months, is that about right?
Yeah.
Because we do it in days rather than months, that is going to impact. It's going to mean that there's going to be a massive surge come November and December in rider training, with people trying to get on top of that because of their theory tests have now, they've got such a delay in the theory tests. I don't want to contemplate what the next pandemic is going to do. I just hope the next time it comes up, it's going to be regional rather than national.
But at least we've got a bit of experience of it already, haven't we? So at least we've got something to draw on. That's something. That's a start, isn't it? Yeah.
You're absolutely right. But from a DVSA point of view, I think the booking system is such a beast that it would be very difficult to switch it off again and not have similar sort of consequences.
Okay, I'm getting a bit wary of time because we're 22. If we could move on, Tom, to the next one, if you don't mind. We've pretty much covered this bit about the industry's recoverable, and we're starting to pick up. The bikes you've picked up with sales on bikes, but the thing is, though, it's all very well people saying, well, these bikes are, quite expensive, but you don't make much money on the sale of a bike, do you? You
Not as
probably,
a dealer, no. The
and
the
then
dealers don't make.
some of the dealerships or some of the manufacturers insist that in that price that you sell that bike for, that something has to be laid to one side for little knocks and niggles, hasn't it, as well? It's got to come out of it too, has it not? So you don't actually get the whole profit. There's got to be a certain percentage.
I don't know the answer to that because I'm not a bike dealer. I'm just a
Oh,
trainer.
right. Yeah. Okay.
So I don't deal in it. But I know that certainly the margins aren't there, and
No.
second-hand bikes, the value's just gone through the roof as well.
Yes.
Because they're especially in the 125 sides. Is it at the expense of public transport? Yes, of course it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially in the larger conurbations.
Yeah.
Um,
Indeed.
if it's and especially London based where we've got the congestion charge that now has gone up in price, and it's gone to 7 days a week.
Yeah.
Till
Yeah.
10 o'clock at night. That's not
Yeah.
helping the large cities where other cities are bringing in congestion charging as well.
I know. I
Um,
mean, the roads are changing shape because we're getting these pop-up lanes, aren't we, as well?
yeah,
Which is
yeah,
reducing the width of road as well, and so it's making it harder for people to get around. So what are they going to do? Well, they're going to go on a smaller, more narrow vehicle. So the bikes are ideal for it, really. That's the situation.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely.
But I,
I'm not sure what you mean by will more private practice takes place. Are you talking
well, it's a question I
ADI
was going to ask you actually, because although you do training with as a supervising motorcycle trainer when you're doing CBT and you are doing your courses, are the motorcyclists allowed to be accompanied by somebody else who's a full license holder on a
No.
bike behind? That's not allowed, is it anymore?
So
No.
it's
Okay.
not been allowed for many years.
Yeah.
So with cars, as long as your accompanying person has been held a license for more than 3 years,
Yeah.
anybody can sit inside as long as they're obviously insured, etc.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, on motorcycles, you can't. You cannot ride a bike larger than 125 cc's on
Mm-hmm.
learner plates
Mm-hmm.
without a DVSA qualified instructor
Mm-hmm.
behind you. So yeah, it's so private practice doesn't take place. Where it does take place a little bit is if somebody comes along and does a CBT,
Mm-hmm.
and we pass them on the CBT. If they want to go and buy a 125 and ride around on a 125 before they come and do their full license training,
Yeah.
that's allowed. And in reality, we don't normally suggest that. We normally recommend people do their full license straight away. But in
Yeah.
these times, we are suggesting people go away and practice on a 125 only because test availability is so very
Yeah. Yeah. Indeed.
stretched.
Yeah.
It could be 2 months before we can get tests for them.
Yeah.
So in that meantime, if they want to practice, it will make their full license training, the direct access training, a lot easier.
Yeah.
So, but they still have to come back to rider trainers in order to do that.
So how long does a CBT certificate last for now? Because when I was
Two
doing
two years.
it was 3 years, was it not?
It was originally, but
Yeah, of course.
it's
That's when
now
I was
two
doing it, it
years.
was 3 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. If we can move on, Tom, please.
Okay, so yeah, what are the opportunities for ADIs to become motorcycle trainers? Absolutely, yeah. We, as a rider training industry, we're always crying out for new instructors. There's 3 stages to becoming a motorcycle instructor. Slightly differently, there is a separate level within motorcycle training to car ADIs. So you have a body called the ATB, which is an approved training body. Now, the approved training body sits above instructors. So a motorcycle instructor can't go and teach pupils like you can with an ADI. It's you're only allowed to train for an approved training body. And it's that approved training body that delivers the training effectively. So it's an extra level. So the 3 levels of qualifications: down trained motorcycle instructor. A down trained instructor is where you are trained by the approved training body. You're authorized by the approved training body, but you can only deliver CBT training to customers of that approved training body. The second part is to go to Cardington near Bedford to complete CBT1. This is a 2-day assessment where they test your ability to be able to deliver a CBT and your ability to be able to supervise somebody delivering a CBT. Now, once you've passed that 2-day assessment at Cardington, you can then still only deliver CBT training, but you can do it for any approved training body, not the one that's trained you. The third stage is to go back to Cardington again for another half-day assessment to test your ability to be able to deliver training on bikes larger than 125 cc's. So that's effectively Mod 1 and Mod 2 for the direct access, and that's the same way. That's the way of getting yourself qualified as a motorcycle instructor.
And they're known. The people that do CBTs are known as down trained, are they not? Still, is
So
that right?
down trained
Down
instructors.
trained, yeah. So you're supervised by the fully qualified motorcycle instructors for that ATB, and when you go out on a CBT with the learners, that guy is supervising you as well.
Sorry, say that one again.
So when I was doing it, I was only allowed out on the with the trainees initially. I had to follow and watch them train, and then they allowed me to do it, and I got given a ticket for that.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I
So,
could
so
take myself.
part of your training, you have to be with a CBT1 instructor.
Yeah,
But once you've been authorised as a down trained instructor, you can conduct training on your own.
that's right.
It's a little bit like the PDI
Yeah,
qualification.
that's right.
Um, but so yes, you can do that, but it's it is the fact that you can't actually do any training on a motorbike without an approved instructor.
Okay. Well, what we'll do then is we'll move on into the questions if we can, then, Mark, if that's all right.
Yeah.
And I've got a question here, and I think it's from Param again. I provide PPE to my students because I don't know where their PPE has been. I make sure I tell my students that in advance, and that's the cars. Param's a car instructor. I know Param. He's an ADI over in in London. Sorry, Param. He's in London, and he's talking about the gloves and the masks, etc. Anything that's required for cars. You have said that you are all right with. You prefer the bikes for them to provide their own protective gloves and preferably their own helmet as well, I suppose. Do you?
That's what we encourage them to do.
Yeah,
Definitely.
but they need it anyway. They've got to buy it sometime anyway.
Mm.
So yeah, okay. Right, 30 test parts. Got that there. Right, okay. So this is the Param show by the look of it. I wish we as ADI car instructors had the same rules as bike instructors. You can learn with a car driving instructor and not someone who's held a license for 3.5 years who's not an instructor. So effectively, anybody training on a motorcycle has got to have the qualification to do it, and it can't be done by mum and dad. That's, I think, what Param is saying there. And I think it's high time that happened in our industry. But I do feel myself that, in no disrespect to the ADIs, I do feel in most respects that the motorcycle industry is conducted more professionally because they have to jump through more hoops. We have to go through the AGI Part 1, 2, Part 3, or standards checks, whatever we call it. The motorcycle trainers do a similar type of thing, but I believe that
the ATB has to standards check every instructor 4 times a year.
Really? Do they really?
Mm-hmm.
Good grief. Right. So that keeps them on their toes, doesn't it?
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
As well as our 4-yearly official DVSA standards checks.
Yeah.
The ATB has to standards check every motorcycle instructor 4 times a year.
So who is the monitor of that? Would that be you in your case, going around the country doing that, or what?
So it's the ATB holder's responsibility to do that.
Right. Okay.
So whoever the ATB holder is,
Yeah.
and that that doesn't matter whether if you're a two-man band,
Yeah.
or a massive organisation like we are.
Hmm.
We have 80 odd instructors, so
Yeah.
so that's like 160, 320 standards checks a year we have to do. It's almost a full-time job
Yeah. True.
for
Right.
somebody to do that,
Hmm.
which is kind of quite difficult to do. You're allowed to do peer-to-peer assessments, so
Right.
a Cardington assessed instructor
Hmm.
can assess another Cardington assessed instructor. Um,
Hmm.
and we do a lot of peer-to-peer peers just in order to keep that up and running. But yeah, we are more controlled. But is that right? We are at the end of the day, right, with an ADI, somebody can't go out on the road on their own without going to see the DVSA.
Right.
We're putting people out on bikes on their own after potentially a day's worth of training. So,
Yeah.
is that not more responsible in terms of why we have the extra checks? I think that probably is the
Oh
case.
yeah, I think it definitely warrants the extra checks because of that.
Mm,
In terms of the end user going on the road, probably less qualified than the driving instructor's pupil. I can see that that is probably a bit of a weakness, but in terms of the trainers training on motorcyclists, I think you've got it better than we have. And so I don't mean, I mean, when I say that is, I think your setup is for more professional training. I mean, you're saying about the pass rates are far higher, and I think the engagement is better. The only thing I find that may be a problem that I don't quite get at is when we're doing learners in a car, they've got time to go away and reflect on what they've done. When you're doing courses on a 4 or 5 day week, the students you've got from day to day have less time to do the reflection on the day before, because although they have their CBT plate, they can go and do bits and pieces they've trained on the big bikes that they've now left back at your ATB at your site, and they get back on their moped or on their 125 and they go and practice. But they've only got a little bit of time to be able to change the behavior in their riding. Whereas I think we've got the advantage of being able to self-reflect for a lot longer time than what you've got. And I think there's a bit of disparity in that. But the training side of your professional, the way it's done with the bikes, so you guys have, I think you've got to be a lot more intrinsic on what you look for in
mm,
what you're doing with the training than we
mm,
have. We're a lot more lax with it.
mm,
I think that needs adjusting. I think that needs balancing up a bit better, to be honest with you. I really
mm,
do. And I
yeah,
always feel that we need to have in our industry a entry qualification. It's not just someone with a driving license who likes to drive, who's had it for 3 or had it for 6 years, who can go and take the exams and just be a driving instructor. I feel there should be some form of entry qualification, like the teaching profession has to have. Well, they go have degrees, not go that far, but some sort of diploma that's required in order to become a driving instructor before you do your training. And I seriously think that's needed. I really do.
yeah, yeah. No, absolutely.
But how would that affect your industry? I mean, if all your trainers had to come in with that qualification, because a lot of your trainers come from many walks of life, don't they? They're not all full timers. Some of them come in and do it as a hobby type thing, but they do something during the week, and on a Saturday and a Sunday they're doing CBTs for you. So how would that affect you if that was a situation?
It would just take longer to get them qualified, and I think there is a lot of part-time people doing motorcycle training because they enjoy motorcycling and they enjoy passing those skills on.
Yeah, yeah.
I think all it would effectively just do is just increase the time. In fairness,
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, Mark, I think we've probably come to the end of this
yeah,
now.
I
It's
think we
5 minutes
probably have.
past
Yeah.
12. Thank you ever so much. Is there anything you want to say at all before we go to sign anything off and sort
No,
of?
I think we've discussed quite a lot, and that's all good. I just hope some ADIs want to think about doing that, and if they want to know where to go, then just email the help desk at the DIA,
Yeah, great. We'll
um,
pass it
and
on.
and we can provide them with the information of where to go to get training.
Yeah, we can pass them on to you. Is what we can do, and
Yeah,
you can advise if need be. Yeah, if
yeah,
they go through the
absolutely.
so the help desk is support at driving.org. That's the help desk as far as the AD, to get to the ADIs. It's support@driving.org. If you email that and say you want some more information, we can forward all that on to Mark for you. So, as I say, Mark's national training organisation. There should be somewhere around your area that's related to Mark that he can help you on the way with.
I can put you in touch with wherever we are. Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, okay, all right. Well, thank you so much, Mark. Thank you very much for your time.
No problem at all.
It certainly has been a sort of compare and contrast type thing there, which is useful for us as driving instructors. I know you've got some motorcycle instructors who have been listening as well, but it does help to see how the other half works. It really does.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also, what we've got to look out for. Things that we do, which are traits in the driver training that you do as motorcycle training, and perhaps we should be looking out for what the motorcyclists are doing more than what we are, and put it in our training. It's all useful stuff. All works as CPD.
Yeah, good stuff.
Anyway, great, thank you, Mark. We'll speak to you again soon. Okay,
all right. Talk to you soon. Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Okay, everybody, thank you ever so much for listening. I'm not certain at the moment if we've got another webinar for next week or not. I didn't get a chance to check beforehand. So what we'll do is the next communication we send out from the DIA, what we'll do is we will put in there what the webinars are that are up and coming, or you can always check on www.diaacademy.com. .co.uk. Check on diaacademy.co.uk, and it comes up with the forthcoming webinars that will be for the next week or two. So you can either look there or wait to see if it comes in the next communication we send out, which may well be this afternoon. Okay, so thank you all so much. I'm going to sign off now. Wish you a lovely weekend. We got beautiful weather today. Enjoy it, and we will talk again soon. Thank you ever so much indeed. Tom, thank you too. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.